Texas, 1944. The sun burns low over endless dry fields, turning the horizon into a sheet of gold and dust. A convoy of army trucks rattles down the road, carrying German prisoners of war from the docks at Galveston toward an inland camp. Their boots are dusty, their uniforms wrinkled from the long ocean voyage. Among them sits General Friedrich Amsel, once proud of his Prussian discipline, now watching the landscape with disbelief. Through the narrow gap of the truck's iron bars, he sees men in denim overalls driving tractors, waving to the passing convoy with easy smiles. He laughs, sharp and dismissive. They call this an army men who grow corn. His companions chuckle quietly, shaking their heads at the absurdity. In their minds, power still comes from steel, tanks, and flags. They cannot imagine that these farmers are part of the same machine that crushed the Africa Corps and bombed the Ruhr Valley night after night. But on the back of the truck sits a young American guard, Private Raymond Cole, a farmer's son from Kansas. He hears the laughter, reaches into his pocket, and takes out a kernel of corn. Without turning his head, he tosses it over the side of the truck. The small yellow grain bounces once on the dusty road before sinking into the earth. We grow what feeds the world. Sir, he says quietly. The road falls silent. Even the wind seems to stop. Amsel's smirk fades as he looks down at the soil, stretching endlessly in every direction. It is not the wasteland he thought. It is alive. As the convoy approaches Camp Hearn, the trucks pass through rows of wheat fields so wide they appear to merge with the horizon. There are barns larger than aircraft hangars, silos like towers, irrigation channels running like veins across the land. Every acre whispers the same truth: this nation fights with more than weapons. Inside the camp that night, the German officers talk quietly. One mutters that the Americans are fools for wasting fuel on farming instead of artillery. Another recalls seeing a woman on a tractor with her hair tied back, laughing as the machine roared through the rows. Amsel listens but says nothing. In his chest, a strange unease grows, something that feels like doubt. A guard walks by with a flashlight, and the beam sweeps across the German faces. Dust still clings to their hair. On the floor near Amsel's boot lies a single corn kernel, caught in the folds of his uniform. He picks it up, turning it in his fingers, the way a soldier might study a bullet. Outside, beyond the barbed wire, the night hums with distant machinery, engines plowing, threshers grinding, silos filling. Power here does not roar from factories or parades. It murmurs through the soil, steady and unstoppable. If you value stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps preserve forgotten chapters of history. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Long before sunrise, the land begins to move. The first sound is not of soldiers marching, but of engines awakening, tractors rumbling to life, gears grinding, belts tightening across Iowa, Kansas, and Nebraska. Lights flicker on in barns like distant stars. Men and women step into the chill, wrapping scarves around their faces, boots sinking into soft mud. They are not heroes of legend, but they hold the world's hunger in their calloused hands. In Berlin, the Reich Ministry of Food reports that Germany's grain output has fallen by nearly 40% since 1942. Bombing raids have left silos empty, fields burned, and horses slaughtered for meat. Yet across the Atlantic, American fields stretch unbroken for miles, guarded not by fences but by faith that the harvest will come. Where Germany counts losses, America counts acres. In 1944, U.S. farms produce over 380 million tons of grain, enough to feed every soldier, every ally, and still have enough to store. Machines roar day and night, tractors replace armies. Steel plows carve the earth deeper than artillery ever could. The German officers imprisoned in the heartland can hear at every dawn a low industrial thunder rolling across the fields. Major Wilhelm Schaefer, an agronomist before the war, once told his comrades that soil means nothing without command. But inside Camp Clarinda, Iowa, he begins to sense something different. Through the wire, he watches a farmer's teenage daughter carry feed buckets twice her weight, smiling in the wind. No medals, no orders, no slogans, just endurance. He writes in his diary, smuggled later through a Red Cross parcel, "We built our empire on fear. They build theirs on harvests. That line will survive long after the war ends. Meanwhile, film reels from the U.S. Office of War Information show endless convoys of food shipments, mountains of wheat, rows of milk cans, rivers of corn pouring into train cars bound for Atlantic ports. As Luftwaffe bombs flatten European cities, these shipments cross the sea, feeding Britain, North Africa, and later, ironically, the very prisoners who mocked their makers. Power, the Germans had believed, came from the barrel of a gun. Yet here, in this vast silence of soil and sweat, power hums differently. It smells of diesel and hay. Not blood. It is patient, rhythmic, unstoppable. One evening, lightning cuts across the Iowa sky, splitting clouds above the open plains. The rain comes heavy, soaking the earth and the camp alike. German prisoners press against the fences, watching American farmers kneel in the mud to protect their crops from flooding. Not soldiers, but defenders nonetheless, guarding something more essential than borders. And as thunder rolls away into the distance, Major Schaefer realizes the bitter truth that his textbooks never taught him real strength does not shout. It grows. Morning fog hangs low over Camp Hearn. Inside the mess hall, the air smells of toast, butter, and brewed coffee. German officers sit on wooden benches, their uniforms faded, but their posture still stiff with pride. At the center table, General Amsel eyes his tray golden bread, thick bacon, fresh milk, scrambled eggs. His fork hovers midair. "You eat like this during war," he says finally, his voice half disbelief, half resentment. Across the table, an American sergeant with rolled-up sleeves looks up from his own plate. "Yes, sir," he answers evenly. "Every morning. Our cows don't take orders from Hitler." The laughter that follows is brief, almost hesitant. Even the Germans allow a smile. But it is a fragile one. For a moment, the absurdity of war dissolves into something human, the shared warmth of breakfast. Yet beneath that warmth lies humiliation. The quiet realization that the enemy who captured you is not starving, not crumbling, but thriving. Amsel cuts the bacon with his knife. The fat crackles softly. In that sound, he hears the collapse of everything he once believed about discipline, scarcity, and sacrifice. Germany had turned food into a weapon. America had turned it into routine. That was the difference between endurance and obsession. By 1944, the United States feeds over 11 million soldiers across the globe, from the jungles of the Pacific to the frozen fields of Belgium, while still providing butter, cheese, and milk for families back home. Factories in Chicago can 1 million cans of meat daily. Powdered eggs, dehydrated potatoes, and condensed milk flow from assembly lines like ammunition. The news reaches the camp through the radio. POWs hear reports of Victory Garden civilians planting vegetables behind every home, school, and church. It bewilders them. In Germany, people dig for survival. In America, they dig to contribute. That small difference in motive rewrites the meaning of strength. Later that week, a guard delivers letters from the Midwest. One comes from a farmer's wife named Evelyn to her husband serving in Europe. A German officer who can read English borrows the envelope, pretending disinterest, but reading every word. "The hens laid 12 today. I sent butter to the church kitchen. They said the POWs liked it." He folds the letter slowly, returning it without a word. That night, he cannot sleep. In the dim barracks, a few men whisper about how such abundance can exist in war. One mutters that America must be hiding its real suffering. Another says, maybe there is no suffering to hide. Outside, crickets sing beneath the moonlight, and somewhere beyond the camp, a farmer's tractor hums through the darkness, plowing for the next day's breakfast. For the German officers, the war suddenly feels very far away and terribly small. The morning sun over Kansas rises like molten copper, flooding the plains with light. German prisoners are marched out to work detail under the supervision of local farmers. Their boots sink into the rich soil, soft and warm. What stretches before them is not a field, but an ocean of wheat, waving, endless, alive. The wind turns the stalks into golden waves that move in silence, as if the earth itself is breathing. Colonel Hans Kubler squints at the distance, shading his eyes with a trembling hand. He has commanded divisions across North Africa and France, but never seen anything like this. "This is not land," he murmurs. "It's an ocean." The farmer beside him, A tall man named Walter Briggs wipes his brow and replies with quiet pride. And every wave feeds someone. The colonel does not answer. He just watches as the tractors crawl over the horizon like small ships, pulling plows that cut deep, straight furrows in perfect rhythm. The prisoners work beside American laborers turning hay, stacking sacks, hauling grain, and for the first time, no one is giving orders. They are simply keeping pace with the land. The irony is not lost on them. These men who once believed in conquest now serve the soil of their captors, yet the humiliation they expect never arrives. Walter brings them cold water, sometimes sandwiches, and never speaks with cruelty. One day, he leaves a bucket of apples near the fence. Kubler hesitates before taking one. He turns it in his hand, smelling the sweetness, and finally takes a bite. The taste shocks him. It is both foreign and familiar, like childhood remembered through fog. In the distance, train whistles echo. The cars are loaded with wheat bound for the East Coast, where it will be shipped to Britain and France. Kubler stares after them, realizing that this single region produces more food than most of Europe combined. Each mile of track is a vein carrying nourishment instead of blood. As the day wears on, heat shimmers above the fields, dust sticks to their necks. A young American worker jokes that Kansas alone could feed a small army. It already does. Another replies. The Germans glance up, silent, humbled. When dusk falls, the horizon glows like fire. The prisoners pause to watch the sun sink behind the wheat, the sky bleeding into orange and violet. There is no barbed wire visible, no difference between the land inside and out. For a fleeting moment, everyone breathes the same air, bound not by rank or uniform, but by the shared exhaustion of labor. That night, back in the barracks, Kubler writes one line in his notebook. Their power is not domination, it is scale without arrogance. Outside, the wind continues to move over the fields, whispering across a horizon that never ends. Winter, 1944. Snow drifts across the rail yards of Chicago, clinging to boxcars painted with the words U.S. Army Quartermaster inside vast factories. Steam rises from conveyor belts as thousands of workers, men too old for war, women in kerchiefs, teenagers on night shifts assemble meals by the millions. Rows of canned meat slide into wooden crates stamped for destinations like London, Naples, and Casablanca. The Germans in Camp Hearn hear rumors of this army of kitchens. They do not believe it until they see the newsreel shown in the camp theater film reels of machinery so efficient it looks unreal. Rivers of wheat flour pour through funnels into endless sacks. Lines of women pack Spam into tins at speeds faster than bullets. Forklifts load ships with milk powder labeled for overseas troops. A German major sitting in the back mutters, "They have mechanized mercy." His neighbor answers bitterly, "No, they weaponize generosity." Both are right. By mid-1944, America's agricultural output exceeds that of the entire Axis combined. More than 11 million tons of food are shipped overseas that year alone. The Victory canneries of Chicago and Minneapolis operate 24 hours a day, producing meals faster than some armies can march. Even the waste is efficient corn husks turned into animal feed, fruit skins into industrial alcohol for medical supplies. Colonel Kubler, once skeptical of rural America, now studies every figure that reaches the camp. He learns that in Kansas, a single farmer with a combine harvester can reap 100 acres in a day, a task that would take 100 men by hand. He listens as guards discuss how butter shortages in Britain are being relieved by shipments from Wisconsin. None of it fits his understanding of war. The enemy he fought with artillery now conquers with nourishment. Letters from American workers sometimes accompany the shipments. One note found inside a crate sent to POW camps reads, "Eat well, my brother's fighting too. Maybe you'll stop someday." Simple words, but they unsettle the German officers more than any speech. Inside Camp Hearn's canteen, the prisoners begin helping the cooks. Some volunteer to wash vegetables, others to peel potatoes or repair kitchen equipment. It begins as boredom, becomes habit, and finally transforms into quiet participation. Major Schaefer writes another diary entry, this time less defiant. "I thought we lost because we lacked steel. We lost because we forgot humanity can be organized too." He closes the notebook as the evening siren sounds. Outside, A supply train passes the camp fence, its wheels striking the rails in rhythm 12 beats per second. The pulse of an empire feeding the world. Would you forgive your enemy if they fed you? Summer 1945. The war is over, but the work is not. The sun beats down over a field near Sherman, Texas. Where American farmers and German prisoners now labor side by side, there are no guards shouting orders. No rifles drawn, just the rustle of wheat and the steady creak of wagons. The barbed wire fences have loosened, replaced by a quiet understanding. Colonel Kubler wipes sweat from his brow. His once pristine uniform has turned brown from dust and soil. Across from him, a young American named Robert Jenkins, barely 20, leans on his pitchfork and grins. Never thought I'd have a German helping me with my harvest. He jokes. Kubler smirks, his voice dry but soft. Never thought I'd enjoy it. They work until their shirts cling with sweat. The air smells of sun and hay. Nearby, two POWs and a local farmhand argue cheerfully over how to stack sheaves faster, for the first time since capture. The laughter sounds genuine. By now, news has reached every camp Europe lies in ruins. Bread lines stretch for blocks. In cities like Cologne and Berlin, children trade trinkets for crumbs. Yet here in America, silos overflow. Government orders arrive for shipments under the new Marshall Plan: wheat, butter, canned meat, all bound for the very continent that once declared war on them. Major Schaefer helps nail crates shut, his hands steady but his heart uncertain. It feels wrong. He tells Jenkins, "We fought you, and now we fill your ships." Jenkins shrugs. Maybe that's how wars really end. Later that evening, the German officers are invited to share a meal under a makeshift canopy beside the fields. The menu is simple cornbread, beans, coffee. The smell is intoxicating after a day of labor. As dusk settles, someone passes around a harmonica. A POW named Klaus begins to play a slow tune, melancholy, tender, almost a hymn. Fireflies drift through the air, their light blinking softly over bent heads and dusty boots. Kubler sits quietly, watching the young Americans laugh, their faces lit by lanterns. He glances down at his hands, rough from work, streaked with soil. "It feels honest," he murmurs. For the first time, his voice carries no rank, no command, only truth. When the meal ends, the farmers and prisoners shake hands. No flags, no speeches, just simple gratitude above them. The night sky stretches vast and clear. It is the same sky that watches over Europe, now beginning its slow rebirth. As they return to their barracks, one German soldier turns back toward the darkened fields and whispers, "Maybe we should have listened to the farmers first." His companion nods, too tired to reply. Do you think compassion can be stronger than ideology? Berlin, 1950. The streets still bear scars from fire and rubble. Apartment walls are patched with boards, and children play among ruins that used to be homes. In a small flat overlooking the Spree River, Colonel Hans Kubler, now a civilian, sits by the window with a newspaper folded across his knees. The headline reads, "American wheat arrives at Hamburg. Marshall Plan expands." He stares at it for a long time, unable to move. He remembers the Texas sun, the smell of wheat, the sound of tractors rolling like thunder. The men he once called peasants are now the reason his country eats again. He looks at the photograph printed below the headline, dock workers unloading white sacks stamped "From the people of the United States of America." Among them are children reaching up for bread handed down from the ships. Their faces glow with the same hunger he saw in his soldiers years ago. But this time, the hand that feeds them carries no rifle. Kubler lowers the paper and whispers, half to himself, "The farmers we laughed at are feeding us again, outside." A train whistles faintly from the direction of the port. He imagines the cargo butter, powdered milk, sugar, tins of meat, all the same smells and textures he once knew inside a camp mess hall. For the first time, the sound no longer feels foreign. It feels like forgiveness moving on steel rails. Across the continent, former German officers now work in agricultural reform programs set up with American aid. Major Schaefer, once a prisoner in Iowa, leads workshops teaching soil preservation and crop rotation in rural Saxony. His students, many no older than 20, listen as he describes machines that can plow entire fields in an hour. When they ask how he learned so much, he only smiles. In captivity, he says. I learned freedom. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Robert Jenkins, the same farmer who once shared bread with a POW, reads a letter from Germany thanking his family for sending seed donations. He tacks the letter to the wall of his barn. His son asks what it means. Robert simply says, "It means the world is smaller than we thought." In the evenings, Kubler walks past Berlin's rebuilt bakeries. The smell of fresh bread fills the air. He pauses outside one window and watches a young woman lift a loaf from the oven. For a moment, her gesture gentle. Careful reminds him of Evelyn's letter, the one that spoke of hens and butter and kindness during the war. He smiles faintly. Wars destroy nations. Farmers rebuild humanity. And as the city hums back to life, the man who once laughed at corn now understands what fed victory and what feeds peace. History often remembers those who fight, not those who sustain. Yet between the roar of battles and the silence of treaties, it was the quiet rhythm of harvest that decided the fate of millions. America's strength during the war was not only its steel and machinery, it was the miracle of abundance. Multiplied by compassion, every sack of wheat shipped across the Atlantic, every can of meat sealed in a Chicago warehouse, carried more than food. It carried a message that survival could be shared. The German officers who once sneered at the simplicity of farming found themselves transformed by its truth, in the patience of soil and the humility of labor. They discovered the one force their ideology could never control: decency. Years later, as they helped rebuild their shattered homeland, they carried that memory like a quiet seed. In the end, the story of those fields in Texas and Kansas is not about conquest or defeat. It is about how a kernel of corn, tossed into the dust by a young soldier, could outlast empires, how something so small could grow into forgiveness, and how, in the endless cycle of planting and reaping, the earth itself seems to whisper one enduring lesson: power fades, but kindness endures.